It's now time for Trivia Tracks with yours truly, Price Robertson. This episode of Trivia Tracks is brought to you by ProMed Ambulance Services, care you can count on, and Beth Smith at Edward Jones. Edward Jones, making sense of investing, member SIPC. Whatever your politics, it's important to keep in mind that someone like the President of the United States, even in this day and age, is prone to making one mistake after another. In 1968, businessman Malcolm Smith published a book called John F. Kennedy's 13 Great Mistakes in the White House. Smith, who once served as chairman of the Mutual Broadcasting System, became alarmed with the way television can literally elect an unqualified man president largely based on his looks and charm. Kennedy was just 43 years old when he was elected in 1960 and was 46 when he was assassinated 3 years later. Theodore Roosevelt was 42 years old when he took over the presidency following the assassination of William McKinley in 1901. Smith's book cut to the chase on Kennedy's blunders without one harsh word. Among them, President Kennedy sent the first American troops to Vietnam, over 1,000 of them, 53 of whom never came home. The Bay of Pigs invasion of 1961, perhaps one of the worst blunders of the Kennedy administration, came less than 3 months after his swearing in, when a group of Cuban exiles invaded Cuba to topple the government of communist dictator Fidel Castro. It turned out that the exiles had been trained earlier by the CIA under Kennedy and his predecessor Dwight Eisenhower. The invasion was a total failure, with more than 1,000 exiles, and Kennedy became personally responsible for it. Some historians argue that Kennedy's youth played a role because at that time he deferred too much to his military advisors and other Washington veterans who supported the invasion. The space race involving the U.S. and Russia also comes to mind. Although JFK realized that America had to catch up and try to be the first country to put a man on the moon, tragedy struck when 3 astronauts died during ground testing of the first Apollo when the USA was trying to launch their first person in space. Russia emerged as the true victor, with Yuri Gagarin becoming the first man in space. Alan Shepard became the first American man in space shortly afterward. It took 8 years for a man to set foot on the moon. In this case, Neil Armstrong, with some help from Buzz Aldrin. In the years since John F. Kennedy's death, a flood of books, speeches, and magazine articles, among others, have convinced millions of people that it was time to understand the mistakes Kennedy had made while in office. Of course, Kennedy isn't the only president, Republican or Democrat, that comes to mind. Others include Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, and even Joe Biden. During the 1980 presidential campaign, Ted Kennedy briefly ran as one of Carter's challengers, but eventually dropped out. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. recently launched his own campaign and is challenging Biden, who many voters on both sides of the aisle believe it's time for the 80-something president to go. Till next time, I'm Price Robertson. Amazed by today's trivia? Then join me for Trivia Tracks weekdays at 6:45 on Everybody's Country Y95.